In a dying universe, where even the cosmic will has perished, Zhang Yi and his companions face a chilling dilemma. As they witness the brutal aftermath of a gang raid, the question arises, can this broken world, plagued by the pollution of time travel, truly be saved? Or are they, like Wolverine before them, destined to worsen a situation beyond repair? Their plan hinges on recruiting the forgotten, the downtrodden, but a far greater, unseen threat looms, a nightmare that haunts Zhang Yi's every step. And, what about the strange bat boomerang? Zhang Yi knew very well what consequences the unknown time travel would bring. Just like the chrysalis trying to pull the multiverse into the abyss, anything unexplainable outside the sandbox will cause huge pollution after entering the sandbox. This kind of pollution is not only aimed at the future timeline, but also the countless complicated information carried by outsiders will also put the world in an extremely dangerous state. The impact on information is invisible and intangible. Similarly, this pollution is not unpredictable. But what is interesting is that each branch of the universe has its own unique circulatory system. After being affected by information from other universes, the universe will activate a self-cleaning mechanism, just like the human body's immune system, to eliminate bad information and pollution. But that kind of processing method can only be applied to the normal multiverse, and the current universe, which is gradually coming to an end and is about to close its coffin when it dies, has no ability to drive its own immune system. In other words, the will of this universe has been dead for a long time, and the life currently remaining in the wasteland of this universe is just a group of cells living on corpses. One day, maybe a year, maybe 100 years, the corpse of the universe will eventually rot, and their future will also lead to a road full of long nights. No one knows what is at the end of the road, just like a boat sailing on a planet full of oceans without any land. The will of that planet has long since died, and the only remaining wind and waves are just the reverberations of his death. Can this universe really be saved? Or, do they really deserve to be saved by us? At the top of the valley, Kara stared at the tragic situation below the mountain from a distance. This was not the first time she saw the darkness of the world, but every time, it made her heart sink a little deeper. At the foot of the mountain is a robbed caravan. In order to support their families, the merchants who survived had no choice but to embark on the road of traveling merchants. They used their savings to buy some camels and carriages, and walked on the wasteland, just hoping to make a small fortune in the next town. Perhaps, only these businessmen can truly see through the misery and despair of this world. Guys like them who travel with large quantities of goods to sell them are undoubtedly gold that can go away to the gangsters. These businessmen tie their heads to their belts. They never know which one will come first, tomorrow or the accident. They also don't know whether wealth or sharp knives are waiting for them in the next town. But they know that if they don't do this business, then the entire family will starve to death on the streets, or become slaves to others. Sometimes in order to ensure as much safety as possible, businessmen will try to work together as a group. They will raise funds to recruit some capable mercenaries as security guards. For example, Eagle Eye was in this industry before. But this is not a guarantee. It does not mean that the trip will be safe if someone protects it. The attacks of gang members are often more ferocious than they imagine. Because for the gang members, if they cannot rob a big sum this time, then the entire gang will fall apart, and the relationship between the two is like a wolf and a sheep. If the wolf succeeds, the sheep will die. If the sheep succeeds, the wolf will die. The laws of nature cannot be changed. In the past, if she had discovered such a thing, Kara would have rushed forward without saying a word. She could not just watch those gangsters kill people and then leave, nor could she accept that she did nothing at this time. She wanted to avenge the dead businessmen. But now, she held back. For the first time in her life, she stopped her body and began to move her brain. She wanted to think, she wanted to find a real solution to all this, instead of doing meaningless treatment of the symptoms rather than the root cause. It's good that you learn to think about the meaning behind it all. Zhang Yi and Pietro stood behind Carla, looking at Carla's appearance. Zhang Yi nodded slightly and continued. Kara, I have never thought of myself as a hero. The title of hero means so much that it cannot be explained clearly in 1 or 2 sentences. But I know a saying that times make heroes. When the moral order collapses, world, and the emergence of heroes will only make it worse. Zhang Yi is not just talking nonsense. In the comics, after Hawkeye's death, Wolverine stretched out his sharp claws again because of the death of his wife and daughter. He decided to follow the inertia of his previous thinking and solve all this in a heroic way. He took Banner's most promising baby Hulk out of the Gobi Desert. He rode a white horse and announced the return of Wolverine to all the criminals in the world. Dragging his old and tired body, he used self-healing that had long since failed. With factors and alloy claws, he even killed through the entire wasteland. But the result? Wolverine personally destroyed the Hulk gang, leaving only a mess that ordinary people could not take over. Later, the Punisher gang took over. They were more vicious than the Hulk gang, and the casualty rate of ordinary people was even higher than that ruled by the Hulk gang. It will be even higher. There are endless villains to kill. If you kill a man-eating shark, there will always be new sharks coming following the smell of blood. If you want to change all this, then you must not use the old method. I couldn't change the world I lived in Pietro. At that time, I had no strength or ability. I couldn't even protect myself. My goal was just to fulfill my promise to Pietro. But now, I want to try to do something, not only for the ordinary people living here, but also for ourselves. Even if it wasn't for slogan-like measures such as saving the common people, Zhang Yi still had other deeper anxieties. The chrysalis that pollutes time and distorts reality has always shrouded Zhang Yi's mind like a nightmare. Zhang Yi knew that his power was not strong enough. There were more secrets waiting for him to explore. Zhang Yi never thought that he would be able to master unprecedented power after tearing apart reality. He knew that for the unknown existence, I am still too small. Regardless of the eternal night sky or the past of the time controller, these secrets are not something that I can touch now. Zhang Yi couldn't mention these anxieties to anyone. He only knew that he should keep his feet on the ground. After losing the energy supply of the ruined universe, Zhang Yi urgently needed a new universe to become his energy station, and here, the Wasteland universe under Zhang Yi's feet would be a good starting point. This time, Zhang Yi doesn't want to repeat the mistakes of the ruined universe. What he needs is an absolutely safe universe, a universe that won't collapse all the time. And if you want to do this, there can only be one voice in such a universe. How should we act? Kara blinked. Hearing this, Zhang Yi said calmly. We need people. There are many people who deserve to be summoned here, and the elderly heroes and the descendants of heroes can be counted among them. But for Zhang Yi, they are not the most important. What Zhang Yi needs are people, specifically, ordinary people living at the bottom, ordinary people who cannot control their own destiny and cannot even afford a full meal every day. When the thinking and worldview of two generations are separated, and social civilization regresses back to an era of darkness and chaos, it becomes extremely difficult to reawaken people's conscience. This limitation is unavoidable in any case. Even for Zhang Yi, he must take it step by step. Those long-term plans and lofty ideals are empty talk before they are implemented. There are many difficulties facing Zhang Yi now. For example, the time controller does not have much power at this time, and it is not enough to completely record this timeline, let alone the bat boomerang that inexplicably appears in this Marvel universe. But the good news is that Zhang Yi has a lot of chess pieces in his hand, and with these, they are enough to solve the endgame. Looking at their costumes, they should be the Ghost Riders. The hunting range of those guys spans 3 states. Their motorcycles can do this. These people are very ruthless. Generally, no one will be left alive after the attack. And because they move so quickly, it's not easy for the Mounties to catch them. He said casually, noticing Carla's slightly surprised look. Pietro spread his hands. They were described in the newspaper I picked up before, so I just looked at it casually. Pietro is right. These guys have almost no specific strongholds. They hide in the wilderness. Those places have many natural dangers and there are all kinds of dangerous beasts. These things have become their natural protection umbrella. Even Red the Skeletons can't do anything to them for a while. Zhang Yi explained. Speaking of this, I'm still curious as to why there are dinosaurs in this world. Aren't these guys already extinct long ago? Pietro asked curiously. Hearing this, Zhang Yi recalled it for a moment, and then spoke. These dinosaurs come from the wild land. It is a secret place hidden in Antarctica. It is a very magical place. After the heroes fell in that war, some criminals who wanted to make wealth united together. They used high technology and artillery blasted through the savage land's defenses and killed Khazar. Who is Khazar? Kara asked. Khazar means, son of the tiger. He is the guardian of the wilderness. He was raised by a saber-toothed tiger since he was a child. Later he became an outstanding hunter. He has been guarding the wilderness all year round from those who careerists get involved. Zhang Yi replied. After hearing these words, Pietro reacted immediately. It's like Tarzan, right? Yes, you can understand that. After he and other guardians sacrificed, the criminals took away countless rare and valuable metals and resources. At the same time, some people took away some dinosaurs. They felt that this kind of creature could survive here. Sell it at a good price. Zhang Yi paused and continued. But you have also seen the situation. The world has changed. Although these dinosaurs are very rare, not everyone can afford them. The people who bought them soon found that they could not feed them, so they put these dinosaurs away at will. Released into the wild. There is no need to mention Zhang Yi later. Creatures such as dinosaurs came to the current ecosystem and are themselves mechanical gods. In the absence of natural enemies, they reproduced crazily in the wild and behaved in such a way that no one could react. Speed destroys the ecological balance. By the time Red Skull and Dr. Doom came to their senses, it was already too late. Those dinosaurs had already integrated into the Wasteland world and became an indispensable part of the current ecosystem. The discussion about dinosaurs did not last long and was interrupted by the attack of the Ghost Riders gang. I don't know if Zhang Yi and the others were lucky or not, but the route that the members of the Ghost Rider gang left was exactly where they were. Looking at the dusty scene from a distance, Zhang Yi stopped teaching the two people. I guess we have to finish class early. It seems like these guys won't stop. Zhang Yi shrugged at Carla and Pietro. But these motorcycles are pretty good. With the help of these things, we can reach our destination tonight. Don't worry Zhang, just leave it to me. Pietro stretched out, with a confident smile on his lips. Kara, you go too. Zhang Yi thought for a while and asked. Make the scene grander. The bigger the better. It's best to make people think that this is all done by the Hulk gang. Our actions should be more secretive. Faking it into a gang fight will save us a lot of trouble. Understood. Kara responded. The next moment, Carla and Pietro rushed out one after another. The violent force directly caused a huge airflow, blowing all Zhang Yi's hair back. The Ghost Riders gang obviously hadn't gotten over the joy of the harvest just yet. They laughed wantonly and galloped across the desert waving their weapons. But soon, they stopped laughing. They saw a dark head. The leader of the Ghost Rider gang looked up and saw a figure leaping high into the sky, blocking the sun. And, that thing it also came downwards at a faster speed. What the hell is that? The leader uttered a heartfelt exclamation. Immediately afterwards, a surging air flow roared past him, and the terrifying power directly swallowed his entire body. At this moment, his brain lost all consciousness before he could react. The leading member of the Ghost Rider gang felt that he had been hit head-on by a missile, or that he had hit a steel fortress made of vibranium while flying. A deafening loud noise exploded at this moment, setting off a sandstorm that covered the sky and the sun. It's hard to imagine what kind of power can do this. It seems that only those extraordinary people of the past can exert such terrifying power, right? The aftermath of the explosion directly blew away several gang members who were nearby. They didn't know what happened. The next moment, the perspective came to mid-air, the perspective moved rapidly, and finally fell heavily to the ground, and then no movement at all. Enemy attack! Enemy attack! The gang members who followed were shouting and raising their weapons at the same time. The jingling of chains and the roar of motorcycles formed a unique symphony in this desert. They didn't know the identity of the attackers, and they didn't care about it. They only knew one thing, and that was to break all the bones in the attackers' bodies into pieces. Some even picked up howitzers, which were what made them rich. What responded to them was a fist packed with destructive power. For the members of the Ghost Riders, it was a brutal massacre, just like what they had done to the unarmed businessmen before. But now, they have become the party being slaughtered. Wild wolves have preyed on the lambs, and now they are being targeted by tigers. Several gang members hid behind the motorcycle and shot at Kara. They were sure that the attacker was definitely not a normal person. It was impossible for them to take down the attacker with melee combat with their mortal bodies. But obviously, they still underestimated Kara's physical strength. Even if most of her strength was weakened, these small-caliber bullets still could not break through Kara's skin. Perhaps the only effect of these bullets was to slightly restrict Kara's movements. But this kind of stiff attack did not help the fighting Tianping. They could not stop Kara's massacre, and it was even difficult to delay it for a while. She's a super, just like those freaks in the Hulk gang. With armor-piercing bullets, that's the only thing that can hurt her. After several attacks to no avail, the members of the Ghost Rider gang finally reacted. They got out of the car and took out more destructive weapons from the boxes on the back of the motorcycle. This is not the first time they have encountered extraordinary beings. As early as before Magneto was dead, they often had conflicts with those mutants over the issue of territory ownership. Later, they also often encountered members of the Hulk gang. If you look at the experience of fighting against these unusual monsters, it is obvious that the Ghost Riders are unique among the gangs in the Wasteland. Extraordinary beings are not invincible. This was proven the night the superheroes perished. Those guys with extraordinary powers fell on the battlefield one by one, and some even died of ordinary people without superpowers. In human hands. Everyone understands that extraordinary people also have weaknesses. They are far from being as powerful as imagined. As long as they have enough coping methods, even beings as powerful as Thor can be pulled down by mortals. Rather than living at the bottom of society and looking up to those extraordinary beings, the gangsters in the Wasteland now prefer to watch those high-ranking guys fall from the altar. That's it, damn girl. A strong man with a skull painted on his face stood up, with an anti-aircraft gun on his shoulder, which they specially prepared for the Hulk gang's group of mentally retarded idiots. The strong man's eyes flashed with madness, and he seemed to have seen the image of the girl in front of him with her intestines and stomach broken. But the next moment, a palm suddenly stretched out from his stomach. It was an arm shining with metallic light, stained with scarlet blood and some tiny bone fragments. Didn't you notice? A frivolous voice sounded in the strong man's ears, but the strong man could no longer say anything. Pietro's appearance accelerated the progress of the massacre. Compared with the invulnerable and powerful Kara, the extremely fast Pietro was obviously more dangerous, because in this vast desert, Pietro's speed made it almost impossible for ordinary people to unable to make any resistance. Zhang Yi watched this scene quietly. He did not choose to take the initiative, because with his magic ability, going to help would only cause trouble. Carla and Pietro had cooperated many times, so they would have a better understanding of each other. This wave of Ghost Rider's gang is finished. With Pietro's speed, there is almost no possibility for them to use powerful weapons, and this result shows that they will not be able to resist Kara's unrelenting offensive. Their defeat was already doomed, and many gang members gradually began to flee, but in the face of Pietro's super speed, these motorcycles that had just started were obviously nothing to worry about. However, there was a strong man in a black jacket. He didn't know whether he was in a hurry or something. He actually rode a motorcycle and rushed straight in the direction of Zhang Yi. This brought the distracted Zhang Yi back to his senses. He looked at the motorcycle rushing towards him with doubts in his eyes. Get out of my way. Get out of my way. The strong man's eyes were full of fear, and he was obviously frightened. U%\U0026 UN are seeking death. And if a person reaches extreme fear, his mentality will turn into endless anger. When he saw Zhang Yi standing there without dodge, he immediately took out the meteor hammer in excitement. Originally, Zhang Yi was still thinking about what to eat tonight. After all, he was responsible for Carla and Pietro's 3 meals, but now, he was directly confused by this strong man. Without thinking too much, Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly turned blood red. The next moment, he clenched the handle of the umbrella in his hand, advanced instead of retreating, and rushed towards the strong man at extremely fast speeds. The strong man had never seen such a scene before, but he quickly reacted. He held the handlebar tightly with one hand to maintain balance, and swung the meteor hammer fiercely with the other hand, aiming fiercely at the person in front of him. Zhang Yi smashed it down. But the result of this confrontation was even stranger than the strong man imagined. His hammer hit the air for some reason, and then a chill spread from his lower body. Unsheathing and sheathing the knife in one go. Zhang Yi's figure stopped slightly on the ground, and at the same time, the scarlet color in his eyes quickly receded. Breathing slightly, Zhang Yi recalled the power he had exerted just now. This kind of speed and control was something he couldn't do no matter what. This was obviously due to the structural improvement brought to him by the harmful beast. Although it is still far from the level of extraordinary, for ordinary people, I can still deal with it even if I don't use magic. The only regret I have is that I haven't gone through systematic fighting training yet. It is obviously a waste to have great power but not be able to use it flexibly. However, Zhang Yi does not have time to practice these things at the moment. Besides, Zhang Yi doesn't want to become a mage who charges and jumps. Silently inserting one of his treasured umbrellas back into the lace of his back, Zhang Yi once again focused his gaze on the battlefield not far away. This encounter ended faster than Zhang Yi expected. By the time he killed the strong man who was panicking, Pietro had already completed the finishing work, and the entire desert returned to calm. This is not a common route for merchants. It will probably take a long time for these guys to be discovered by others. Pietro wiped his metal arm and smiled. Yeah, that's a good thing, too, because it means no one is going to make the connection between what we're going to do in Rock Springs and what's going on here. Zhang Yi lifted the motorcycle that had fallen to the ground and waved his right hand. The next moment, green flames clung to the exterior of the motorcycle, and then started burning at a rapid speed. The appearance of the motorcycle melted and reshaped in the green flames, and gradually deviated from its original appearance, eventually turning into an extremely weird boat-shaped vehicle. Now, no one can think that this vehicle belongs to the Ghost Rider gang. After doing all this, Zhang Yi continued. We want to thank them. With these transportation tools, we can reach our destination tonight. Thanks to Xiao Zai for the 10,000 coin reward. From now on, there will be 3 updates a day, and I will stay up late to code additional updates. The bars of Rock Springs are a paradise for thieves and gangsters. Unlike the territories under the control of the leader Red Skull, the style here is relatively peaceful. After the great mafia Farah family took over the rule here, these gangsters unexpectedly began to govern this area with kindness. Land. There are no gang fights or killing people for fun. The ordinary people living here are just self-sufficient and quiet and peaceful. Although the taxes are a bit high and there are more thieves and cheaters, for them, living here is still a good life. Will not lose his life. The Nafala family prohibits all residents from leaving here, but they are very polite to outsiders. I heard that many gangs from other places will trade weapons with the Nafala family, even Hydra is no exception. Speaking of the history of the Nafala family, there is one person who must be mentioned, Count Lucino Nafala. Count Nefra was also a famous person back then. Any hero who could survive 2 rounds in his hands was a leading figure among superheroes. The enemies he faced spanned the Avengers and the X-Men. Later, almost all famous heroes have fought against him. But now, he is no longer the leader of the Mafia. Sitting on the chair at the front of the bar, Count Nefra held the wine glass in both hands and kept rubbing his fingers on it, as if there was dust on the glass that could never be wiped off. The bartender was already used to this strangely dressed old man. He leaned against the end of the bar, glancing at Count Nefra from time to time. People around the bar also leaned against the edge, trying to get further away from the old man. They are not afraid of this old man. Although this old man is nominally the godfather of the Nefra Mafia, he has already retired after the night when all the superheroes were killed. The reason why people around him are reluctant to get close to him is because this old man has been crazy for a long time. He has been immersed in the past and cannot get out of it. When he meets people, he will tell them about the glorious days when he fought with the heroes. Perhaps on the day when the heroes died, Count Nefra also died in his heart. At this time, he was just living in the event, and he could no longer find a reason for him to fight for it all his life. The bar is filled with the stench of human body and the smell of alcohol. Compared with the inside of the Nefala family, the environment here is not that good, but for Count Nefala, this is the only place where he can get drunk and dream. He knew that most people here looked down on him. Some people regarded him as a clown with strange clothes. Gangsters and thieves would even laugh at his uniform behind his back. But only he knew how popular this uniform was back then. Scenery. You know nothing. Count Nefra's eyes were cloudy, and his soft words were like whispers in a dream. In Los Angeles back then, those people would tremble just by hearing my name. He held the wine glass tightly with both hands, and the waxy and inferior wine was sloshing in the glass. Count Nefra looked at his reflection in the wine glass and his old face, with mixed feelings in his heart. At this moment, the bartender couldn't help but reveal a wry smile. The shiny cup he put down was wiped in his hand, and he turned around and took down a glass of strong wine from the shelf. He knew that the Earl was about to start recalling the past. It's been a long time. Let's discuss it. Lord Earl, I'll give you a drink for free. Please stop telling me about your glorious past, okay? The bartender smiled slightly and filled Count Nefra's glass with strong liquor. Every time Count Nefra was about to tell his past, the bartender would use this method to stop him. Over time, the two of them had already formed a tacit habit. But tonight, the wind has changed in Rock Springs. The door of the bar was gently pushed open. The bartender heard the sound and went out, only to see three figures hidden under hoods slowly walking in. Maybe they were travelers from out of town, the bartender guessed. Winter is coming soon. During this time, we often see businessmen from other places bringing their families here to pray for shelter. Maybe in the Wasteland, this is the only place where those who cannot control their own destiny can have a good rest. The cold winter every year is a disaster for ordinary people in this world. After being looted by various gangs, even the rats in the farmers' warehouses starve to death. Compared with the outside, it is much better here. The three people approached the bar. The bartender quickly put the rag on his shoulders and greeted him enthusiastically. He knew that those outsiders were rich guys. Whether he could make a fortune from them depended on his skills. How can I help you? Just bring some food and the strongest wine you have here. The leading man raised his hand and took out a piece of gold from his robe, which was as big as a wine glass. The bartender's eyes widened at this moment, staring directly at the astonishing weight of the gold nugget. Then he quickly put the gold nugget into his pocket, and then he took out 3 glasses from under the bar. At the same time, he turned around and took out a bottle of wine from a dusty cabinet. You guys drink something to warm yourself up first. This wine will definitely not disappoint you. I'll tell the chef to make you something to eat. After filling the 3 glasses, the bartender gave a heartfelt ugly smile. I want a drink too. Count Nefra drank up the liquor in the quilt in one gulp, and then slammed the cup on the bar. This is my old client. Don't be surprised if he is drunk. The bartender smiled at the 3 of them, and then said to Count Nefra. Lord Earl, my salary cannot afford you in such high-end goods. Hearing this, Count Nefra frowned deeply. At this moment, the man hidden under the hood spoke again. Give him a drink and charge it to me. Blinking, the bartender was stunned for a moment. But he reacted quickly. Okay, as you wish. Since someone was willing to pay, the bartender naturally didn't say anything. He quickly filled Count Nefra's wine, then turned around and walked into the bar's back kitchen. Looking at the blood-red wine in the cup, Count Nefra stuck out his tongue and licked his chapped lips. Then he tilted his head slightly and glanced at the man sitting next to him out of the corner of his blurred eyes. 3 strangers. Coming from out of town. So be it. The man replied. My clothes look weird, don't get me wrong, I know everyone thinks so. Count Nefra took a sip of the strong wine in the glass. In return for this glass of wine, would you like to hear my story? I like stories. Listening to Count Nefra's words, Zhang-Yi raised his hand and lifted his hood to the back of his neck, then picked up the wine glass on the bar and took a sip. He was very thirsty along the way. Focusing his attention on Count Nefra again, Zhang-Yi was able to take a good look at the old man who had fallen into such a situation. Count Nefra is stooped. His body has shrunk a lot as he grows older. The top of his head is bald, leaving only sparse white hair on both sides. His dry, thin face has not been trimmed. A scruffy beard, dotted with some crystal wine. He was wearing the battle uniform he had worn back then, but because he was too old now, his shrunken figure could no longer hold up the battle uniform. It was as if the clothes were one size too big and the entire suit was baggy. It was draped on his body, full of wrinkles. You like stories. That's great. When I tell other people these things, they all laugh at me secretly. I know they look down on me. But they know nothing. Count Nephra's blurred eyes sobered up a little. He pushed himself up and changed into a more comfortable sitting position. Then he turned his head and looked at Zhang Yi. He wanted to see if this person was still interested in the glory of the past. What kind of young people are they? Tell me about it, I'm quite interested in it. Zhang Yi responded with a smile. It was a glorious battle. I got to know those self-proclaimed heroes firsthand. As he spoke, Count Nephra muttered something unclear. Then he raised his head and shifted his gaze to the other two figures wearing hoods and hiding themselves under their robes. We are strong and ruthless. Those heroes and those arrogant ones. The cloudy eyes turned slightly, and an inexplicable energy surged up. Looking at one of the figures, Count Nephra felt a sense of familiarity for no reason. Those. Breathing heavily, Count Nephra felt a little dizzy. He shook his head vigorously, trying to make himself more awake. He closed his eyes hard and then opened them again. In the haze, he saw a figure with silver hair, a smile on his face, and a mocking gaze looking at him. The old Count Nephra's stooped body trembled slightly. He kept rubbing his eyes, and then used all his strength to open his eyes wider, trying to see more clearly. What are those? Zhang Yi asked flatly. Those. That. Count Nephra opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but he couldn't say anything at the moment, because in his sight, he really saw a silver-haired man, who was hiding under the hood. It's you. It's you. The wine glass shattered and the scarlet wine spilled all over the floor. Count Nephra shouted and stood up. However, because he drank too much, his body failed to stand still and he knocked over the chair he was sitting on. What's wrong? The curtain opened and the bartender quickly ran out of the kitchen. Count Nephra burped, holding on to the table with one hand and trying his best not to fall down, while using the heel of his other hand to hit his dizzy head. Your Majesty, you really drank too much. I didn't drink too much. No, I drank enough. Count Nephra retorted loudly. The next moment, his eyes swept across Zhang Yi and the others, and finally stopped at Pietro. I know you. I know you. You came to me. After so many years, I thought everyone had forgotten me. God knows, you finally came to me. Okay, to be honest, I really want to hear your story. Seeing Count Nephra's appearance, Zhang Yi knew without thinking that Pietro had definitely been exposed. There is no way, who makes him attract so much hatred in every universe, almost everyone can recognize this guy at a glance. Now that it has been exposed, there is no need to continue hiding. Anyway, according to the original plan, no one here could get out. That's not important. Cough cough. That's not important at all. Count Nephra's rapid breathing caused him to cough violently, and then he slowly showed a big smile, and his whole person became excited at this moment. Ha ha ha, I know. I know there will be such a day. I have been waiting for 45 years. Every night I will sit in this bar until dawn. I also dream that a hero can open the door and open the door. Now. You are finally here. You'd better calm down, Count. I want to eat something more than what's going on with you right now. To be honest, can't you sit down and have a drink during the last part of your life? Zhang Yi said flatly. Said. I told you, I've had enough to drink. Count Nephra shouted, and then he stared directly at Pietro with his bloodshot eyes. He now recognized this guy's identity. He stretched out his hands tremblingly, as if preparing to give Pietro a hug. Quicksilver, yes, that's the name, I remember you, I still remember you, you were the young Avenger, you're still young now. That's good. It couldn't be better. Pietro's expression changed slightly. He turned his head and looked at Carla, both of whom saw what was expressed in the other's eyes. This old man had gone crazy. If you want to be free. Zhang Yi spoke slowly. Then I don't mind sending you on your way now. No 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 no. Count Nephra, who was staring closely at Pietro, immediately retorted when he heard Zhang Yi's words. He took 2 steps back, turned his attention to Zhang Yi, and kept mumbling in his mouth. I'm not ready, I can't just do this. The old Count Nephra stood still in a daze. He stood up with all his strength, hoping that his chest would be more straight. At the same time, he also sucked on his beer belly, hoping to make his body stronger at the moment. More deterrent. Seeing this, Zhang Yi sighed and drank the wine in the cup again. He quite liked the taste of this wine. It was very strong but did not burn his throat. Count Nefra was muttering something to himself, while he was hurriedly arranging his battle clothes. He opened and buttoned the buttons over and over again. His movements were very flustered, and sometimes he would make mistakes. But he seemed to pay great attention to this matter, as if he was about to rush to the most important moment in his life, just like 45 years ago. Good night. Hey, Earl, you know that delaying the matter will not change the outcome of this matter. Pietro took off his hood. He didn't understand why the old guy had to turn over and over to sort out his unfitting uniform. He also didn't understand that Zhang-Yi didn't take any action even though he could directly resolve the matter. It was like a stupid show, a circus show without any audience, but Zhang-Yi was ready to carry out this playful joke to the end. According to Pietro's understanding, Zhang-Yi was not that kind of person. Listening to Pietro's words, Zhang-Yi didn't react at all. He just drank the red wine in a glass sip after sip. The world has changed. When heroes no longer exist, these supervillains have also lost the meaning of survival. Heroes and villains originally had a symbiotic relationship. When one of them disappears, the other will disappear with it. This has always been the case. In a sense, this is not a sad result. Count Nefra's behavior was funny and ridiculous, like a clown, but looking at this scene, it was hard to find the joke funny. Don't be anxious. Don't be anxious. It'll be fine soon. Count Nefra was so excited that he even trembled with excitement. After he tied the drawstrings of his cloak for the 7th time, he carefully checked his gloves and finally smoothed out the wrinkles on his clothes. Then he raised his head and asked Pietro. How do I look? Pietro was slightly stunned. He knew that the old man in front of him was an extremely powerful villain when he was young, and might even have caused a lot of headaches for the heroes. But now, he is old. No matter how straight he straightens his waist, no matter how beautiful he makes himself, he can't go back to the beginning, just like the faded and patched battle clothes on his body. Glancing at Zhang-Yi and seeing that he was still drinking alone, Pietro shook his head slightly and withdrew his gaze. It's not bad, it looks like. Pietro said casually. But his obviously perfunctory words made Count Nefra even happier. He showed a childlike smile, even though the wrinkles on his face had piled up at this moment. That's good, that's good. Count Nefra kept nodding. Although he really wanted to be more powerful now, he had no choice but to do his best. Fortunately, Quicksilver recognized him. The two fists were tightened and loosened and tightened again. Count Nefra calmed his rapid breathing, and then his eyes drifted away from Pietro and Carla, and finally stopped at Pietro's young face. Superior. You've been waiting for a long time, we can start like before. Like that before? Pietro didn't respond. Yes, it was like that before. Count Nefra just smiled, and then he slowly looked at the unknown bartender standing at the bar. Sensing Count Nefra's gaze, the bartender didn't know what expression to show. He had no idea what was going on. These people seemed to know the Count, but this was the first time he had seen Count Nefala look like this. My Lord Earl, you have drunk too much. You really should leave. The bartender said. Child, you are different from them. Turning a deaf ear to the bartender's words, Count Nefra just showed an expression of sadness or pity. He looked directly into the bartender's face and continued speaking in a voice that only he could hear. That I'm very sorry. Next moment. 2 laser beams burst out suddenly and hit the bartender's head with an unstoppable force, killing him on the spot. Blood splattered everywhere, but the bartender still seemed to have a dull expression. The next moment, his head was blown to pieces like a bursting watermelon. My God. Although most of the people in the bar were doing their own thing, they were not blind to everything around them. As early as when Count Nefra started his ridiculous behavior, many people turned their attention to him. But now, seeing Count Nefra suddenly kill the bartender, these gangsters who couldn't even be called gangsters were instantly frightened. They screamed and left their seats. A few of them shrank crazily towards the corner, fearing that Count Nefra's next attack would target them, but most of them still rushed towards the door. What are you doing? Pietro was confused. He was already ready to fight, but he didn't expect that the laser was not pointing towards him. Like before. Ha 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 ha, cough cough cough. The old Count Nefra laughed hoarsely. His eyes gathered destructive energy and shot straight at the fleeing bar guests. Let's get started, Kid Quicksilver. I'll be responsible for killing them, and you are responsible for stopping me. Pietro glared at Count Nefra. While he was stunned, the laser beam directly tore through the crowd and directly broke the beams at the gate. Those ordinary people who had not had time to rush out of the gate were directly hit by the laser beam. Falling rafters and crisp chips shattered into pieces. Stop me, ha ha ha. Count Nefra laughed wildly. At this moment, he seemed to have regained his heroic appearance. Those ordinary people could only flee in front of him, but those heroes would appear at the most critical moment. It's time to take action. Carla patted Pietro on the shoulder, and immediately she rushed forward. With an explosive punch, the huge power came to Count Nefra in the blink of an eye, but what surprised Kara was that her fist was actually firmly caught by the old man. The fists and palms collided with each other, making a deafening sound. For Kara, who almost killed half of the world in the previous world, she thought she had enough understanding of the power of this universe, but when she found that her full blow was blocked, she still couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. But with this sudden move, Count Nephra took action instantly and knocked Kara away with an uppercut. Count Nephra punched out, and just as he was about to take back his power, he felt a pain in his abdomen, and a silver flash of light flashed across his eyes, and he was beaten back several steps. After stabilizing his body tremblingly, Count Nephra raised his head again. In a hazy state, he actually saw Cyclops, the leader of the X-Men, standing in front of him. "It's over, Nephra, we're going to stop you," Cyclops said righteously, then he raised his hand to adjust his special eye mask, and a laser beam burst out instantly. "Then come and try it." The old Count Nephra retorted wildly, his eyes narrowed, and he also fired a laser beam. Kara's Kryptonian heat vision and Count Nephra's laser beam intertwined violently in midair. The air was torn apart at this moment, and the energy erupted from the bombardment of the two extremely scarlet beams directly caused everything around to be blown away. Tables and benches were torn and destroyed, and they banged fiercely on the walls. The floor of the bar began to crack, and the deep cracks spread like spider webs until they stopped at the ruins at the door. The intertwined position of the two energies even caused the space to be slightly distorted. The red energy rippled in midair like ripples on the water's surface. The dazzling and gorgeous light looked extremely magnificent at this moment. "Supergirl, let me help you." After Pietro said this, he immediately clenched his vibranium arm. Although in an environment like a bar where the space is not wide enough, Pietro is still unable to exert his full combat effectiveness, but his speed is not limited now. After his arms are healthy, his full burst speed is no longer faster than that of other parallel universes. Quicksilver is so much slower. Scarlet energy beams filled Count Nephra's vision, leaving only a blurry scene in his vision. The swirling air currents were scurrying around the bar, and all around Count Nephra could hear the whistling wind. That was the sound of wind that could only appear when powerful power was released. He hasn't used his superpowers for a long time. The ion energy that he used to wield like an arm is now as sticky as honey, making it difficult for him to control it. Brilliant light shrouded all his vision, and Count Nephra couldn't help but let out a low roar, trying to burst out with more powerful abilities. Suddenly, a sense of crisis came from his heart. Count Nephra clenched his fists and prepared to resist, but his speed was too slow. He only felt burning pain on his face. Then, the scene in front of him began. The world began to spin. Falling heavily to the ground, Count Nephra held his hands on the ground, trying his best to prevent himself from falling. He spat out a mouthful of blood and looked at the guy who sneaked up on him with confusion from the corner of his eye. The color of the metal reflected under the broken incandescent lamp in the bar. Count Nephra felt that his head had become dull, and his previously sharp thinking seemed to have turned into mush at this moment. Who is he? How did he attack me? Is this my blood? The old Count Nephra opened his mouth, and the blood pulled down the thread and dripped on the ground, making him more conscious. By the way, it's Colossus. It's the X-Men superheroes. They're coming for trouble, just like they did before, just like they've always done. Kara stopped her heat vision in time, otherwise Pietro, who rushed to launch a close attack, would definitely be accidentally injured. After a period of cooperation, the two had a tacit understanding. "It's over, Mr. Count." Pietro raised his hand, and his vibranium arm grabbed Count Nephra's shoulder. "Not yet. Not yet." Count Nephra shouted loudly, and immediately huge power came from the vibranium arm. Pietro was surprised to find that Count Nephra had burst out with huge power for some unknown reason. The next moment, Pietro felt a sense of weightlessness coming, and he directly was thrown out. Count Nephra looked confused after the sudden outburst. He stood stiffly and steadied his body. The pain all over his body and the somewhat muddy spirit made it difficult for him to think. He turned around staggeringly, his body trembling slightly. "You. Don't try to stop me." I will." The old Count Nephra gasped for breath, staring at Kara's position with dull eyes. In his hazy vision, he vaguely saw a familiar woman. He knew her, he still remembered her, she was Carol Danforth. Count Nephra found his position and let out a beast-like roar, and immediately he rushed towards Kara. Seeing this situation, Kara did not dodge, she made fists with both hands and directly faced him. The two of them were going back and forth, and their fists full of huge power hit each other's face straight. This is not an evenly matched battle. If Count Nephra was in his prime at this moment, he would be able to use his sufficient fighting skills to suppress the girl in front of him, but at this time he can no longer do it. His slow thinking has gradually made him follow not above Kara's quick slam. At first, Count Nephra was able to dodge Kara's fist sideways, and then find the right time to counterattack, but slowly, his arm gradually became stiff. When Carla took advantage of him and hit Count Nephra in the eye with a punch, Count Nephra no longer had any ability to resist. But Kara seemed not ready to give up just yet. She knew very well how powerful these super criminals were when they were young, so she and Pietro exchanged a look. The next moment Pietro took action and directly hit Count Nefera into the air. Kara, on the other hand, jumped up and directly caught up with Count Nefera. When he was about to hit the ceiling, he clasped his fists and smashed him down with all his strength. The sawdust flew and Count Nefera hit the floor of the bar hard, making a deep hole in the floor. He could no longer stand up. Count Nefera's eyes gradually became distracted. In his field of vision, the shaking broken lamp above his head gradually produced a double image, and the waxy yellow light became the only main color in his eyes. Collapsed in the pit on the ground, blood continued to flow from the corners of Count Nefera's mouth. He felt that his breathing had become a little difficult, and he could only make a meaningless hum along with his breathing. It's time for the curtain call. Beside the bar, Zhang Yi drank the last drop of wine and slowly placed the cup on the bar. Only then did Zhang Yi stand up. Turning his gaze in the direction of Count Nefera, Zhang Yi's expression was a little serious. Immediately, he raised his steps and walked towards Count Nefera step by step. Zhang Yi's footsteps were very slow. Every time he took a step, the sound of his footsteps was like stepping on Count Nefera's gradually weakening heartbeat. On his deathbed, Count Nefera's eyes became blurred. At this time, clear footsteps came, which made his somewhat dazed thinking respond. Sensing that someone was approaching, Count Nefera exerted all his energy and tried to wake himself up. He tried his best to tilt his head, trying to see the identity of the person clearly. In the waxy haze, the black figure gradually solidified. In Count Nefera's last glance, he saw Dr. Strange walking slowly towards him, holding his fingers. The red cloak swayed with his body, and green magical energy danced at his fingertips. Every step Stephen Strange took was his final sentence. Count Nefera's lips moved. "I'm very sorry." 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of his eyes to the roots of his ears. At this point, Count Nefera no longer had any hope of life.